him to the shop. Busy outside? I think they're extending a tube line around here, hence the noise. Strange, isn't it? To think that underneath our feet there's almost a second city of commuters and workmen, rushing to wherever they're going. Of course, such a network doesn't come without some risks, and some tragedies. This has led to many stations and lines becoming home to slightly more than the daily rush of workers. Are you familiar with the underground station Bethnal Green? Perfectly pleasant in the day when people are around, but at night, well, it's a slightly different story. During the Second World War, bombs were dropped on London to destroy English infrastructure and break the will of the British people. Those that called London home took to the underground stations for shelter, and so they became a nightly pilgrimage for the city's inhabitants. Bethnal Green was one station frequently used as a shelter, and the night of March 3rd, 1943, was no different. As was fairly normal for the time, the air raid sirens went off, and people started heading down the dark steps of the station. Near the bottom, a woman and child fell over. This caused a domino effect, and the mass of people behind them also fell. As they tumbled, they laid on top of one another, those above inadvertently suffocating those who fell first. 173 casualties in total. Men, women, children. They all perished. Of course, now, thousands of people use those steps every day, a railing and lights making it far safer than it was then. However, supposedly, some of those who died there still remain in some capacity. A station master was locking up for the night some years ago now. The last train had been and gone, along with all the other employees of Bethnal Green Underground Station. Finishing his rounds, he turned off the station lights and retreated to his office to finish up some paperwork that comes with the maintenance of a place such as this. For a while he sat there undisturbed, but as the night drew on, he began to hear sobbing. The pitiful cries of a child, no less. Soon these sobs were joined with the cries of women, and after this, panicked men joined the cacophony that rang off the tiled walls. Terrified, he ran up to the booking hallway to escape the noises that had now been joined by 1,000 new sounds he could not identify. This unholy choir sang for around 15 minutes before stopping, as suddenly as it had started. If this had been a one-off occurrence, it could probably be chalked up to an overactive imagination after a long day. However, countless others have recounted this same experience in the station late at night. I suppose the only real way to test the validity of this haunting is to see for yourself. It wouldn't happen to be on your commute home, would it? How rude of me. Did you come in looking to buy something? I sometimes get carried away with myself. No? Well, do drop by again. You've found your way here once. It has a tendency to happen again. Hello, welcome. welcome to the shop. Anything I can help you with in particular? Do I handle stolen goods? That is quite a question to be asking, isn't it? Items in my inventory arrive via many channels. Sometimes they are brought to me. Other times they seem to just appear. Is there a reason you are asking me this? Or is that a question you ask in every shop you enter? The cross looks familiar to you, does it? No, I can absolve any suspicions you may have about it. That piece arrived a long time ago, and from a reputable source, I can assure you. How reputable? It was a monk, as it happens. Let me tell you about this particular monk. It might put your mind at ease, although I think this is unlikely. St. Dunstan's in East Acton is a church whose history goes back far further than its own bricks and mortar. During the Middle Ages, the site where the church now stands used to be a friary for the monks of the Order of St. Bartholomew. Of course, this is innocent enough, and I suppose not too surprising, but it's what happened at the friary that is cause for concern. You see, the 1500s were a time of great religious upheaval. In an effort to increase his wealth and stifle political opposition, Henry VIII saw to the closing of some 800 friaries, monasteries, and nunneries. His armies marched on these places of worship, and those that complied with the closing were treated fairly. But those who resisted, well, they weren't as lucky. The latter was the case for the monks at the friary where St. Dunstan's now stands. They say that the monks refused to give up their religious convictions and so were all executed. There was no immediate aftermath. The shifting of power continued, and in time the monks who perished there were forgotten. In the late 1800s, urbanization was rapidly leading London to envelop more of the smaller villages that surrounded the city. This was the case for Acton, and in an effort to fill the religious vacuum that the urban sprawl was creating, a new church was commissioned and built, St. Dunstan's. After its completion, for years there were whisperings about strange goings-on at night, but no official from the church would ever confirm these. This was the case up until 1944, when the serving vicar at the time made public knowledge about the apparitions that frequented the building. When night fell, it was said that a series of 12 monks wearing brown habits would walk up the centre of the church before continuing into the chancel. On other occasions, a monk wearing Eucharistic vestments could be seen celebrating Mass in the memorial chapel. But perhaps most surprising of all was the monk dressed in violet robes, who gave advice about confirmation classes to the serving vicar. Of course, these stories garnered attention, and eventually the newspapers wanted a first-hand account of these spectres. To this end, Kenneth Mason was sent to investigate the sightings and vouch for their validity. I would say he got slightly more than he bargained for. Mason stayed past closing time and had the empty church to himself. On cue, the monks appeared, and he reported it was true that a line of 6 monks did indeed walk up the centre aisle of the church. Perhaps foolishly, he stood in front of the apparitions and, to his surprise, they walked straight through him, as if he wasn't there. Once they had passed, a voice spoke to him, hinting at the friary that the church was built on, before saying, "This is our past. This is our future." They then disappeared upon reaching the altar, moments before Mason's photographer arrived. Perhaps this is convenient, or perhaps it is just true. I believe officials at the church tend to discourage ghost hunting. Bad for the reputation, I suppose, Or maybe they are just trying to allow their supernatural guests to worship in peace. So, do you really want to know who gave me that cross? You look smart enough. I think you can probably figure it out. Whether you choose to believe me, now that's up to you. Hello. Welcome to the shop. Are you quite all right? You look a little uneasy on your feet. Now I suspect you are not unwell, but perhaps a sailor. No, you are. Just off the boat, you say. Well, it still shows. Is there anything in particular that you are looking for? A talisman. For protection and good fortune while sailing across the ocean. Yes, I have one on that shelf there, but I must warn you, it comes from Porthcurno. Are you familiar with that area of Cornwall? No? Well, let me tell you a little about it. In particular, a ship that used to frequent its waters. After that, then, you can decide whether or not this is the right talisman for you. A book was written in the 1800s by a man called Robert Hunt. In it he detailed several anecdotes of superstitious beliefs and practices from around Cornwall, one of the most notable being about a ship often seen in the waters of Porthcurno. Only this ship was like no other. Supposedly, when the sea was stormy or mist rose on a dark night, a four-masted sailing ship would appear on the horizon of the sea and slowly draw nearer. Rather than stopping once it reached the shallow water, it would carry straight on through the breakers and up the beach, only coming to a halt when it was within sight of the church at St. Leven, at which point it would disappear. More disturbingly, no crew was ever spotted upon the ship. The deck was always empty and the hatches on the side were shut tight, so if they were below deck, it's clear they wanted to remain hidden. Although most sensible people didn't dare look too closely anyway, many claiming that any who caught a glimpse of the impossible ship would suffer great misfortunes. Now, this is all very strange, but why was this ship travelling through Porthcurno? Well, this was the exact question Hunt asked in his book, his investigations eventually leading him to a reclusive man and his servant. Hunt's book describes the servant as a man of foreign and forbidding aspect, who never spoke to any of the locals, only ever sharing silent whispers with his isolated master. However, the most peculiar aspect of the pair was that, without fail, they would row a small boat out to sea every day, and they would not return until nightfall. While on solid land, their activities were no less mysterious, reportedly going hunting with a bodiless pack of dogs that were never seen, only ever heard. Of course, one day, the inevitable happened. The reclusive master died, and it was decided to bury his body at the Church of St. Leven. However, what happened there shocked all the inquisitive attendants. No sooner than the first clump of earth had been thrown on his master's coffin, the mysterious servant vanished into thin air, this bizarre action being accompanied by violent howls from the pack of invisible hounds. After that, the ghost ship was no more. Whatever linked the strange pair in that ship was never discovered, and I don't think it would be wise to probe too deeply. Do you? Feel free to take the talisman. I'll give you a good discount. No? Well, I can't say I'm too surprised. I hope you get back to the sea soon. I don't know how well solid land sits beneath your feet. Hello, welcome to the shop, home of everything from the fantastic to the fearful. How can I help you today? You've been separated from your tour guide, you say. That's not ideal, is it? I find that going to a city in person, as you've done, is the best way to learn about its intricacies. I could send you on your way, or I could tell you some of the untold history of London. It's no bother. It tends to be rare to find someone willing to listen to these tales that seem so fanciful nowadays. It would be my pleasure. Excellent. Then allow me to tell you the legend behind the very origin of London itself. It is a grand tale concerning the Roman Empire, demons, and a race of giants, two of the most notable of these being known as Gog and Magog. It is said that the Roman Emperor Diocletian had some 33 daughters. Dutifully, he found them all husbands, but his daughters did not want to settle for married life. Together, led by the eldest daughter Alba, they plotted to slice the throats of each of their husbands, and so be free from matrimony. Some say they succeeded in their plan, while others say it was the mere plotting that brought their punishment upon them. It is somewhat immaterial, as their fate remained the same, for when the Emperor discovered what his daughters had done, he wanted them all put to death. Luckily for them, he was dissuaded from this, and instead banished all 33 from his lands in a boat, loaded with half a year's supply of food and water. Most gracious of him. After some time adrift, the daughter's boat landed on the shores of an ancient, wild land. It transpired it was a large island, totally devoid of any civilization, instead ruled by a dense wilderness and a spattering of Celtic tribes. Upon settling, the woman named the land Albion, after their ringleader, Alba. Time passed, and the group of exiles grew tired of merely existing. For companionship, it is said the devil himself created a demonic horde of husbands for the women. Now, with their new, less than human partners, they bred a race of fearful giants who ransacked and terrorized any of the native Celts that dared to cross their path. And so the woman gradually passed away, but the giants ruled the south of the country for centuries. That was until one day the famed Trojan Brutus and his surviving army fled the fall of Troy. Their escape led them across the continent to Albion, which upon arrival they decided to name Britain. It wasn't long before the Trojans and giants clashed. At first, Brutus attempted to fight the giants, but was initially defeated, suffering heavy casualties. Undeterred, he regathered his forces and ordered them to build a deep trench, at the bottom of which they placed great wooden spikes. Once finished, they covered the top of the pit with leaves and fired a volley of arrows towards the monsters. The arrows caught the attention of the giants, which then charged Brutus and his men. As the giants got closer, they fell into the disguised pit, greatly reducing their numbers as many became impaled on the spikes below. Confused and fearful, they retreated, at which point Brutus's men gave chase, killing all save two, Gog and Magog. The pair were captured and chained to the front of Brutus's newly built palace to act as subservient doormen for the remainder of their lives. At least, that is one version of the story. Another goes that Gog and Magog were actually one giant named Gog-Magog. Upon defeating the rest of the brood, only their leader, Gog-Magog, remained. Brutus's top soldier, Corneus, faced Gog-Magog alone in combat and killed him by throwing him off a large rock. In recognition of this great victory, Brutus gave a western portion of Britain to Corneus, which is now known as Cornwall. If you choose to believe the second version of events, some say it is possible to find the high rock Gog-Magog was thrown off near Plymouth. And if you'd rather believe the former tale, then you can visit effigies of Gog and Magog situated on Guildhall in London, the very spot where it is said Brutus built his great palace. I believe effigies of the giants are sometimes still incorporated into the Lord Mayor's show, symbolizing a significant link between modern London and its ancient past. I don't know how informed you are on ancient history, but more modern sources tell us that Troy fell around 2,000 years before Diocletian ruled, an emperor who only ever had one daughter. There is also more to be said on the names of Gog and Magog, as they have a less than wholly biblical origin, and so the fact they have been used in a founding story of London could be seen as quite telling. It's up to you what to believe, though. When studying the past, so much can be misremembered or unwittingly falsely recorded. Who knows the real truth behind the land beneath our feet, save for the land itself? In any case, that's a discussion for another time, and I feel as if I've taken up enough of yours as it is. Enjoy the remainder of your stay in this city, but be careful. You never know what ancient legends of this place might still be lurking in some dark corner of some dirty alley. Hello, and welcome to the shop. home of everything from the amazing to the ancient. Busy outside, isn't it? I hear there's an important trial at the courthouse, and it seems to have drawn quite a crowd. Anyway, how can I help you? Decorations. I don't have much in the way of that sort of thing, but do have a look around. You might surprise yourself, I suppose. That shell. Well, it could fit a theme in a bathroom or kitchen if you lived by the coast. I'm not too sure about that particular one, though. The pattern is fine enough, but as with so many items contained within my inventory, it comes with slight baggage. If you don't have to rush off anywhere, I can explain myself, if you like. Perfect. In that case, let me tell you about that limpet shell, and its connection to the Legend of Jan Tregeagle. Faustian pacts have always been a matter of interest for the general public. The idea of a mortal man making a pact with the devil for immediate gain at the expense of the immortal soul has always been a topic of much discussion and debate. No more so than in the 17th century, when rumours that Jan Tregeagle, a magistrate based in Bodmin, had made one of these pacts in order to amass his great fortune. Along with the rumours of the pact came more rumours about his various evil deeds, from cheating an orphan out of his inheritance to murdering his wife. The consensus was that Jan Tregeagle was not a very nice person. Being an old legend, there are several variations to the tale. However, the most widely spoken describes how in old age the evil magistrate realized the magnitude of what he had given up in order to secure his wealth, and so had a change of heart. Desperately, he gave away his wealth to just about anyone in an act of atonement. From the poor and impoverished all the way to the church, he shed his vast fortune wildly. When the terrified man died, the priests, whether convinced by the monetary repentance or out of a sense of moral duty, banded together to save his soul. And so, Jan Tregeagle was buried in St. Breoch Church near Wadebridge, with the devil missing out on collecting a soul that was, at least in his eyes, rightfully his. At least, that was the case for a short while. Unlike in life, where death tends to end disputes, when dealing in matters of the soul, it is only another step on an eternal journey. Some weeks after Tregeagle's death, a case came before a local court concerning a young man. Exactly what was being disputed varies in just about every retelling, but in every version, Tregeagle is summoned as a witness. Supposedly, The skies blackened, and the ghostly outline of Tregeagle appeared in the witness stand, and almost universal to every retelling, the evidence he gave proved the boy's innocence, and so saved him from punishment. Perhaps it goes to show that what had previously been considered the most wicked man in all of Cornwall really had changed his ways. Unfortunately for Tregeagle, his spirit being summoned back to the mortal realm once again placed his soul in danger of being taken by the demonic hordes. Those who had summoned his spirit gladly gave custody of the spectre to the church, who went about trying to protect the deceased man. Ultimately, it was decided that the only way to ensure his safety was to set him a task to complete until the arrival of Judgment Day. Completion of this task would be near impossible, but as long as he was continuously attempting to finish it, he would be untouchable by the dark forces waiting to drag him down below, and possibly even rewarded with holy salvation. The first task he was set concerned Dosemary Pool, a lake situated on Bodmin Moor. It was believed the lake was bottomless, and Tregeagle's task was to empty all the water from this body of water with a single limpet shell, in which a small hole had been drilled. Year upon year, Tregeagle painstakingly attempted to move water out of the lake with the defective shell, with little to no progress. While monotonous, it kept him being dragged to hell, and so he continued, without a single moment of rest. However, one day, an almighty storm forced him to cease his work. His sudden stop allowed the demons waiting in the shadows to resume their hunt, and so he fled. Fortunately, demons are unable to cross water, and so with that head start, Tregeagle managed to claim a sort of sanctuary at the chapel on Roche Rocks. It was only a sort of sanctuary, for while his head and some of his upper body resided in the church, the window he had jumped through out of fear was not quite big enough to fit his lower half. Luckily for Tregeagle, his cries mingled with the screams of the pursuing demons got the attention of the priest, who enlisted the help of his holy brethren to protect the damned man from the devil's servants. While under their protection, they also set him a new task to complete, to keep the monsters at bay. Instead of removing water from Dosemary Pool with a limpet shell, he now had to make a truss of sand, then bind it with rope weed from that same sand at Gwenvere Cove. After transporting him, they left him on the beach, and he dutifully set about his task for many years. Now, one of two things disrupted Tregeagle's progress. The first theory is that yet another storm crossed paths with the labouring man, washing away all his progress and again forcing him to flee the observing demons. And the other is that one night it became so cold that some water he was pouring on the sand he was working on froze, allowing him to actually complete his task. Either way, St. Petroc was summoned to help the fearful man, who encased him in an almighty chain and dragged him to a place on the south coast near Helston. The saint then gave him a great sack, into which he was to shovel all the sand on a beach near the River Colber, before carrying to cross the water and depositing it at Porthleven. Tregeagle was to repeat this arduous task, until only rock remained at the beach. Cunningly, St. Petroc knew this would keep the man busy until Judgment Day, as the tide would continually bring fresh sand to the beach, and so he'd never be able to finish the task, no matter how hard he tried. While Petroc was indeed clever in his suggestion, the demon forces that watched over Tregeagle's soul were equally intelligent. One day, as the man crossed the river in an attempt to complete his labor, a demon tripped him, causing the sand from his sack to spill across the water, forming low pool and low bar. Again, the interruption caused Tregeagle to flee, and seeing what had happened, the local clergy begged he be given a new task for the sake of his soul. Some greater power listened, and he was indeed given a final task, which he carries out to this day. Tregeagle has been cursed, or perhaps blessed, the job of sweeping all the sand from Porthcurno Cove around the headland to Mill Bay. They say that on stormy nights you can hear Tregeagle howling and screaming at the futility of his labor, sweeping away until Judgment Day arrives, at which point his soul will face its final reckoning. Funny how something like limpet shell can be far more significant than you could ever imagine. In any case, does it still appeal, or would you rather leave it? Not for you, then. I suppose that's fair enough. Feel free to come back and browse my stock anytime. Just remember, be cautious with whom you next strike up a deal. It could cost you a lot more than you anticipated.